What would you do if you truly believed you had nothing to lose? Not someday, not after you're ready, right now, because the truth is the life you want isn't being blocked by lack of talent, luck, or opportunity. It's being blocked by the fear of losing what you already don't love. Most people aren't playing to win. They're playing not to lose. And that mindset quietly steals their power, their urgency, and their destiny. The moment you stop protecting comfort and start acting like there's nothing left to defend, everything changes. Most people think they're being smart when they play it safe. They tell themselves they're being responsible, realistic, mature. They say, I can't risk that right now, or I have too much to lose. But let me tell you something that might challenge the way you've been living your life. The illusion of safety is the most dangerous place you can live, because what feels like protection is often just fear wearing a suit and calling itself logic.br. Think about it. What are you really protecting? A job that drains your energy but pays the bills, a version of yourself that feels acceptable to others but empty to you, a comfort zone that keeps you busy but not fulfilled? Most people aren't afraid of failure. They're afraid of disruption. They're afraid of rocking the boat, of being seen trying and possibly falling short. So they cling to what's familiar, even when it's slowly costing them their confidence, their passion, their sense of aliveness. Here's the truth. Most people never confront. Safety doesn't eliminate pain, it just spreads it out over time. When you avoid risk, you don't avoid loss. You delay it, you lose momentum, you lose belief, you lose years. And one day you wake up wondering how you ended up so far from the person you thought you'd be. That's not safety, that's a slow leak on your soul. BR, real danger isn't failing. Real danger is living your entire life in rehearsal, waiting until you feel ready, waiting until conditions are perfect, waiting until you have more confidence, more money, more approval. But confidence doesn't come before action, it comes because of action. Clarity doesn't come from thinking, it comes from moving. And courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision that what you want matters more than what you're afraid of. When you act like you have something to lose, every decision gets smaller. You negotiate with your fear, you hesitate, you second guess, you ask for permission, and the energy behind your actions becomes weak, cautious, diluted. But when you act like you have nothing to lose, something extraordinary happens. Your posture changes, your voice changes, your standards rise. You stop asking, what if this doesn't work? And start asking, what if this is the moment everything changes? For people who break through, don't do it because they're reckless. They do it because they're honest. Honest about the fact that staying where they are is costing them more than stepping forward ever could. They realize that comfort is not the same as security, and certainty is not the same as fulfillment. They stop trying to manage their fear and start using it as fuel. Ask yourself this: if the thing you're protecting disappeared tomorrow, would you finally give yourself permission to go all in, to speak up, to take the shot, to build the thing, to leave what's killing your spirit? If the answer is yes, then here's the real question. Why are you waiting for loss to give you courage when you can choose it right now? But you don't need to burn your life down. You don't need to be irresponsible. But you do need to stop confusing familiarity with safety. Growth requires exposure. Expansion requires discomfort. And every meaningful upgrade in your life will ask you to release the illusion that you can control the outcome while staying comfortable.br. The people who win at life are not the ones who avoid risk. They're the ones who understand. The real risk is staying the same. They know that betting on themselves is the safest investment they'll ever make, even when it feels uncertain, especially when it feels uncertain.br. So stop asking yourself how to stay safe and start asking yourself how to stay alive, because the moment you let go of the illusion of safety, you reclaim your power, and that's when everything starts to move. Act like comfort is the risk and courage is the way. Forward.br. Let's talk about the real cost of playing small, because most people don't see it while it's happening. They think they're avoiding loss, avoiding embarrassment, avoiding rejection. But what they're actually doing is choosing a loss they can live with over a risk that might change everything. And that choice compounds quietly, daily, until one day it feels normal to want more but settle for less. When you hesitate, when you hold back, when you tell yourself now's not the time, something inside you takes notes. Your nervous system learns that fear is in charge. Your identity starts to shrink to match your behavior. You don't just miss opportunities, you train yourself to expect less from life. And the most dangerous part is that it doesn't hurt all at once. It hurts slowly enough that you call it reality. People think playing small keeps them safe, but let me tell you the truth. Playing small is expensive. It costs you momentum. It costs you belief. It costs you the edge that comes from taking bold action. Every time you choose comfort over courage, you pay a price in confidence. And over time, that price becomes so familiar that you forget it was ever a choice. Think about how many times you felt the pull to do something bigger, to speak up, to make the move, to take the leap. But you didn't. Not because you couldn't, but because you didn't want to risk being wrong. Each time that happens, a little part of you learns to stand down. And the next time, the opposite. Unity comes, it takes more energy to even consider it. That's how people wake up years later wondering where their fire went. Here's the paradox. Most people never grasp the pain of failure is sharp but temporary. The pain of regret is dull but permanent. Failure stings, but it teaches you, it strengthens you, it forces you to grow. Regret just sits there whispering, what if, for the rest of your life. And yet most people choose regret because it feels safer in the moment. Or you already lose by not going all in. You lose time you can't get back. You lose versions of yourself that never get a chance to exist. You lose the energy that comes from knowing you're living in alignment with what you want. Playing small doesn't preserve your options. It slowly eliminates them. .dr. And let's be honest for a moment. The things you're afraid of losing, status, approval, security, are they really fulfilling you right now, or are they just familiar? Most people protect lives they don't actually want because they're afraid of the temporary discomfort it would take to build a better one. The moment you truly understand this, your standards begin to shift. You stop asking, what's the safest move? And start asking, what's the honest move? You stop negotiating with fear and start listening to your hunger. Because hunger is information. It's your signal that you meant for expansion, not maintenance. When you act like you have something to lose, you operate with hesitation. But when you're already losing by staying where you are. Urgency kicks in. Your actions become cleaner. Your decisions become faster. You stop waiting for perfect conditions and start creating momentum. And momentum, once it starts, is one of the most powerful forces in the human experience. People who change their lives don't do it because they suddenly become fearless. They do it because they get tired of paying the price of inaction. They reach a point where the pain of staying the same outweighs the fear of stepping forward. And that's the moment everything shifts. .br. So ask yourself this with real honesty. What is playing small costing you right now? Not someday, not in theory, right now. In your energy, in your confidence, in your future. Because once you see the cost clearly, you'll realize the risk you've been avoiding isn't the real danger. The real danger is choosing a life that's too small for you. There's a certain kind of energy that shows up when fear of loss disappears, and most people never experience because they're too busy protecting themselves. But the moment you stop clinging to what you might lose, you tap into a level of power that feels almost unreasonable. Your body changes, your focus sharpens, your actions stop leaking doubt. This is the energy of someone who is no longer negotiating with fear. Think about the moments in your life when you were at your most driven. Maybe you had nothing in the bank, no reputation to protect, no one to impress. Ain't calculating every move. You were hungry, you were scrappy, you were willing to try, fail, adjust, and try again. And because of that, you moved faster, learned faster, and grew faster. That wasn't desperation, that was freedom. When you believe you have something to lose, you hesitate. You pull your punches. You play not to mess up instead of playing to win. Your mind becomes occupied with worst-case scenarios, and your energy gets split between moving forward and bracing for impact. But when you act like you have nothing to lose, all that scattered energy collapses into one direction, forward, and that focus creates force. .bar. This is why people at their lowest often make the biggest breakthroughs. Not because they're lucky, but because they're no longer trying to preserve an image. They're not trying to protect comfort or avoid judgment. They're just trying to move. And movement creates momentum. Momentum creates confidence. Confidence creates results. It's a chain reaction that begins the moment you let go of what's holding you back. Nothing to lose energy strips away perfectionism. You stop waiting to feel ready. You stop asking for permission. You stop rehearsing failure in your head. Instead, you take action and let life give you feedback. You become adaptable instead of rigid, responsive instead of reactive. And that adaptability is one of the greatest advantages a human being can have. Here's what most people misunderstand. This isn't about being reckless. It's being decisive. When you're no longer obsessed with protecting yourself, you start trusting yourself. You make bolder moves because you know you can handle whatever comes next. And that belief changes how others respond to you. People feel your certainty. They sense your conviction. They want to follow it, support it, invest in it. Have you ever noticed how different someone feels when they're all in? Their words land differently. Their presence fills the room. It's not because they know the outcome. It's because they've committed to the process. They've accepted that growth requires risk and that failure is feedback, not a verdict. When you act like you have nothing to lose, rejection stops being personal. Criticism stops being paralyzing. You're no longer asking the world to validate you. You're too busy creating. And in that state, Creativity explodes. Solutions appear where obstacles used to be. You see opportunities others miss because you're not filtering everything through fear. This is the kind of energy that changes trajectories. It's what turns ordinary effort into extraordinary results. Not because the world suddenly becomes easier, but because you stop carrying the unnecessary weight of what might go wrong. You free up mental and emotional bandwidth that was being wasted on worry and redirect it into action. The irony is this: the moment you stop acting like you have something to lose, you become someone who gains. You gain resilience, you gain speed, and clarity. You gain a deeper trust in yourself. And that trust becomes the foundation for everything else you build. So don't wait until life strips things away to find this power. You don't need to hit rock bottom to access top-level energy. You just need to decide that fear of loss will no longer dictate your behavior. Move like there's nothing left to protect and everything to create. Let's go deeper, because everything you've heard so far comes down to one core truth. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You act in alignment with the identity you believe is yours. Long before a result shows up in your life, it starts as a decision about who you are. And most people don't fail because they lack discipline or motivation. They fail because they were trying to build a powerful future while still operating from a limited identity. Think about how you describe yourself when things get hard. Do you see yourself as someone who figures it out no matter what? Or someone who hopes things work out? Do you see yourself as a leader, a creator, a builder, or as someone who waits for permission, approval, or certainty? Your answers to those questions determine the intensity of your actions. And intensity is what separates wishful thinking from real momentum.ur. When your identity is small, your effort is cautious. You don't push all the way because part of you doesn't believe you're the kind of person who follows through. So you hedge, you keep options open, you leave yourself an XI, T-ramp. And then you wonder why your results are inconsistent. It's not because you don't want it badly enough. It's because you haven't decided who you are when pressure shows up. Here's something most people don't realize. Identity is not fixed. It's trained. Every action you take is a vote for the kind of person you believe yourself to be. When you hesitate, you reinforce the identity of someone who waits. When you take decisive action, even imperfectly, you reinforce the identity of someone who moves. Over time, those votes stack up, and the identity becomes automatic. This is why acting like you have nothing to lose is so powerful. It forces an identity shift. You stop seeing yourself as someone who needs to be careful and start seeing yourself as someone who can handle whatever comes next. You stop protecting an image and start building evidence. And evidence is what rewires belief.br. Notice how people who operate from a strong identity don't need constant motivation. They don't rely on hype or perfect conditions. They show up differently because they see themselves differently. They don't ask, do I feel like it today? They ask, what does someone like me do in this situation? And that question eliminates debate.bar. When you decide who you are, your behavior follows. You don't need willpower to act in alignment with identity. It's natural. A leader leads, a builder builds, a fighter fights. The moment you claim that identity internally, your standards rise. What you erate changes. What you allow into your life changes. And suddenly things you used to struggle with, procrastination, inconsistency, self-doubt, lose their grip. But here's the catch. Identity is proven under pressure. Anyone can feel confident when things are easy. The real test is who you are when fear shows up. When uncertainty hits, when the outcome isn't guaranteed. That's where most people collapse back into old patterns. Not because they can't handle it, but because they haven't rehearsed being powerful in those moments. You don't wait for confidence to act. You act to build confidence. And every time you choose action over avoidance, you reinforce the identity of someone who doesn't fold under pressure. Over time, that identity becomes solid, unshakable. And once it's there, intensity becomes effortless. This is why two people can have the same opportunity and produce completely different results. One is trying to achieve something, the other is expressing who they are. One is chasing a goal, the other is living an identity. And identity always wins.br. So stop asking yourself what you should do and start asking yourself who you are deciding to be. Because the moment you upgrade that decision, your actions will rise to meet it. You'll move with conviction instead of hesitation. You'll act with urgency instead of fear. You'll show up fully instead of partially. .br, decide who you are and let your actions prove it. Most people don't struggle because they lack intelligence or ambition. They struggle because they're waiting for certainty in a world that only rewards movement. They think if they can just plan a little more, think a little longer, prepare a little better, they'll finally feel ready. But readiness is a myth. Clarity does not come before action. It comes from action. And the longer you wait to to move, the harder movement becomes. Perfectionism disguises itself as productivity, but it's really fear in a clever outfit. You research, you outline, you rehearse, you tweak, and you tell yourself you're being responsible. But what you're really doing is delaying exposure, because once you act, the outcome becomes real. Once you move, you risk feedback, and feedback forces growth. That's what most people are trying to avoid. But decisive action, even when it's imperfect, creates momentum. And momentum is one of the most powerful forces in human behavior. When you move, your brain shifts from prediction mode into problem-solving mode. You stop imagining everything that could go wrong and start dealing with what's actually in front of you. Energy follows motion. Confidence follows evidence. And evidence only comes from doing.br. Look at your life honestly. How many things are you still planning that you could have already started? How many decisions are you postponing because you want a guarantee? Guarantees don't create winners, decisions do. Every meaningful breakthrough in your life was preceded by a moment where you didn't know how it would turn out, but you moved anyway. Bar. When you act decisively, you send a message to yourself that you trust yourself. And that trust compounds. You begin to see yourself as someone who doesn't freeze under pressure, someone who doesn't wait for perfect conditions. And that identity shift changes everything. You stop needing motivation because momentum takes over. People who succeed don't have better plans, they have better follow-through. They understand that the plan will evolve once reality enters the picture. They're not attached to being right, they're committed to making progress. That flexibility gives them an edge because they adapt faster than people who are still thinking. Here's the truth. Most of your fear is imaginary. It's created by a mind trying to control outcomes it cannot predict. But the moment you act, fear collapses into data. You either learn what works or you learn what doesn't. Both outcomes move you forward. Stagnation doesn't. Our action is a declaration. It says, I'm no longer waiting for permission. It says, I'm willing to learn in public. It says, I trust my ability to adjust. And when you operate from that place, opportunities start to respond to you. People respond to movement. Life responds to movement. You don't need a perfect strategy to begin. You need a starting point. And once you have that, you can refine, optimize, and improve. But none of that happens without motion. Overthinking keeps you safe in theory, but stuck in reality. When you act like you have nothing to lose, decisiveness becomes natural. You stop treating action like a risk and start treating inaction like the real danger. You realize that every delay is a choice, and usually the wrong one. .br, so don't wait for clarity. Create it. Move first, adjust fast, and let momentum carry you forward. Every breakthrough you admire in someone else's life started the same way, before the confidence, before the proof, before the applause. It started with a moment of boldness, not certainty, not comfort, boldness. A decision to move even while the voice of doubt was still loud. And that's where most people hesitate because they believe confidence should come first. But confidence is a reward, not a requirement. But life doesn't respond to intention, it responds to courage. It responds when you step forward without a safety net and declare through your actions that you're willing to figure it out. The moment you do that, something shifts, not just around you, but within you. Your nervous system recalibrates, your self-image expands, you start seeing yourself as someone who acts instead of someone who waits. Most people are waiting to feel ready before they're bold, but readiness is built by repetition, not by waiting. Courage grows when you use it. The first time you speak up, your voice shakes. The first time you take the leap, your heart races. But the 10th time, the fear loses its grip. Not because it disappeared, but because you proved you can move with it present. Boldness compresses time. Years of overthinking can be bypassed by one decisive act, one honest conversation, one uncomfortable step, one refusal to settle. That's how trajectories change. Not gradually, suddenly. And once that shift happens, your entire future reorganizes around that new standard. People think boldness is loud or aggressive. It's not. Boldness is clarity. It's choosing alignment over approval. It's saying yes to what calls you forward and no to what keeps you small. It's walking away from what no longer fits, even when it's familiar, especially when it's familiar. The world doesn't reward potential, it rewards expression. It rewards those who put themselves in motion and allow life to meet them halfway. When you act boldly, you activate forces you cannot access from a place of caution. Opportunities appear, people notice, resources move, not because you're special, but because you're visible. And here's the most important part. Boldness doesn't require fearlessness. It requires commitment. Commitment to your growth, commitment to your standards, commitment to becoming the person your future demands. Once that commitment is made, fear becomes irrelevant. It can be present, but it no longer decides. Your breakthrough is not hiding in the future. It's waiting on a decision you've been postponing, a line you haven't crossed, a version of yourself you haven't fully stepped into. And the longer you wait, the more expensive that delay becomes, not in money, but in life. Bar, you don't need permission. You don't need perfect timing. You don't need one more sign. You need to choose boldness before you feel ready, because that choice is what creates readiness. The moment you move, you become someone who moves. And that identity compounds faster than any strategy ever could. So stop asking when confidence will show up. Stop asking when fear will leave. Start asking what bold action looks like right now, today, in this moment. Because life doesn't open up to those who wait to feel brave. It opens up to those who decide to be bold anyway.